Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs Podcast, the show for founders who want growth without the guesswork. Here we talk about systems driving predictable growth, and today's guest is someone who's lived on both sides of the table, corporate scale and entrepreneurial chaos. What makes her story different is she'd already scaled at the highest levels, but after leading thousands of people across dozens of countries, she walked away, started over, and rebuilt her business from scratch. Tammy Alvarez, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jay. It is great to be here. I've been looking forward to recording with you for weeks now, so glad we're finally here.
The pleasure's on mine. Thank you for being here. All right, so let's kick things off. You've led 2,000 or more people across 35 different countries. What did scale teach you that most founders don't learn until it's too late?
Yeah, that's a great question. You learn by accident more than by practice, I think. And the biggest things that scale taught me is that the path forward is never what you think it's going to be. And you start with this idea or this vision or this strategy of where you want to take things and then how you're going to get there. And it is having that fluidity in the journey from where you are to where you need to be is what scale taught me, both, from a national perspective in the States, from an international perspective around the world. But, the steps are the same. It's just the complexity that changes.
Yeah, okay. So Tammy, I want to go into your story here a little bit, but you went from Wall Street to the solopreneur life, and a lot of people do. They have successful corporate careers and then they struggle when they start their own businesses. Why do you think that is? Or maybe what are some of the patterns you're seeing that causes that struggle?
Sure. I can also share with you my journey because I was a hot mess when I got started. I think the reason I struggled so much is because I had led such large scale initiatives and had 25 years of a successful career. I just assumed that I knew all the things. And as it turns out, I didn't. And I'm stubborn, so I make mistakes twice versus once because I have to beat my head against the wall more than one time. And coming in with the corporate mindset, coming in with a idea of how things really worked and making such a dramatic pivot from a big corporation to a solopreneur operation wasn't anything I had prepared for. And quite frankly, when I started the business, it was a bit spontaneous. My daughter had graduated college, so she was off the payroll. And my partner, Steve, and I had decided we were going to stop dating and actually make a go of it. And I was bored out of my ever-loving mind with my job. Even though it was high stakes, it was just kind of the same crap, different shade of lipstick. So I cashed out of Wall Street, moved to a tropical island off the coast of Belize, and figured I'd start a coaching business of some sort. And I think as an entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur, the biggest mistake I made is I was so confident in what the market needed and that I was in the perfect position to be able to deliver that need. But what I forgot to ask was, is this a problem someone is willing to pay for, to solve? And that's where things got hard. And so I think as an entrepreneur, especially coming from big corporate, it's the assumptions and the biases that we have because of what we've been through. It's the lack of, I would call it humility. And you go thinking, okay, I actually don't have all the answers and maybe I should learn from someone who's done this before. It took me about 1.5 years before I finally hired a coach to help me get my act together. And really the getting comfortable with having this experience mindset, which I've always had, which was part of my success, but it was very different when I was the one writing the checks and getting comfortable with making those mistakes, even though I knew that it was my bottom line personally that was paying for it.
Thank you so much for that context. It really shapes who you are, and by hearing your backstory and how you've got here. There's been a lot of changes internally within yourself, from changing the corporate mindset to the entrepreneur mindset. But what's one thing that sticks out? What's maybe one habit or way of thinking that you subscribed to when you were on Wall Street that you had to unlearn, or a habit that you had to break in order for you to be successful?
I think one of the biggest things I had to unwind, and it wasn't had to, this was part of my own deal with myself in terms of making this pivot, is that the rules that I played by in my corporate career, the guardrails that were put in place, I refuse to allow them to exist in my business. And in terms of the always on culture, and the grind, and you have to kill yourself to be successful and do more than everyone else. And we've been doing this for 8 years and I've never worked more than 30 hours a week. And there was 2 things I swore I would never do again. I would never set an alarm clock for work. Now, if we're leaving on a great trip and it's an early flight, I'll do that, but not for work. And I would never eat in front of a computer screen again. And I remember, and as you know, when we were living in Belize, we're big scuba divers. And so we would go diving a couple of days a week before work because the reef was super close and we could get a one tank dive in and be back in the office by like 10:30. And I remember when I started the business, I'd be on the dive boat heading out feeling guilty that I wasn't chained to my desk. And and at first I was like, who even knows I'm here or cares, right? Because you're just getting started. But it was that mindset that we have to always be on. We have this crisis culture where everything is just so make or break that, we just put ourselves under that pressure. And when I stopped doing that and got comfortable with it, which took me about a year and a half or 2 years to really start to lean into and live that, then I realized that I was setting a much better example for my clients who were still in that space. And most of our clients don't cure cancer or save lives. And so it is okay if things wait till Monday. And I think as entrepreneurs, we feel like until we quote unquote make it, that we have to put in the extra reps. And the reality is you don't. And so I think that was one of the biggest things I had to unwind from a mindset and from a leadership culture perspective is how to show up big, but on my terms.
Yeah, that's such a valuable nugget right there because that's just our American grind culture mentality. And it's something that I no longer subscribe to the hustle culture. That was very much me and it's got me to a certain point in my career. But at this stage in my life, 41 years old, I'm just like, I don't need to do that. I don't need to kill myself anymore. I want to ask you, you moved from a solo coaching model to now a 15 advisor model, which is pretty cool. Talk about that transition a little bit.
Yeah, the biggest thing that helped me with that transition was hiring someone to help me scale. And so I had gotten to a certain point, probably around 200K a year, and I just couldn't get past that. And while living on tropical island, that was plenty of money, with all the things. I'm like, yeah, I cashed out a little early. And so I'm here to like build an empire, not just a commercially viable side hustle. And now no matter what I did, I kept getting stuck. And so I hired this advisor to help me scale. And she was an advisor for a larger company. And as we were working together, she was showing me all the things that I thought I needed to know. And as we were working together, her company kept getting, and winning things like Fortune 500 fastest growing company and best companies to work for. And I'm like, wait a minute, like, what are you doing? So forget about what I think I want to know. Like you're living this, you're about 5 years ahead of where I think I want to be. And what she did is she opened up that curtain and showed me everything, all the nooks and crannies and how they did it and their operating models and where they started, the mistakes they made, because she had been there pretty much since the inception. And so after a bit of trial and error, I applied what they were doing to my business. And within 1 year, I had to hire 7 coaches. And we've been continuing to grow ever since. And I think part of the things that helped us grow so quickly is we played bigger before we needed to. And so before, we didn't wait to get the clients or to have the perfect solution or to bring this thing to market to where we were already underwater and then tried to hire fast. I brought the infrastructure in first, to run the business so I could do the things I love to do in terms of client acquisition and working with our advisors. And they all just kind of synced together. So when you think bigger and play bigger before you're ready, then when those opportunities come, you knock it out of the park and then the business just continues to explode from there. And quite frankly, I was lonely. Like I'm used to having a line out my door and nonstop meetings and all these things and having people that I could collaborate with and strategize with. And I miss that element of corporate. And so bringing that into the organization was just as much to serve our clients' needs as it was to kind of fill my need too, in terms of having those contemporaries that I could collaborate with.
Yeah, so Tani, you shared some cool things there about your transition, getting people onto your team. Earlier, you talked about how you don't set an alarm to wake up for work or to start work. Just as a fun question, if somebody shadowed you for a week, what would surprise them the most about how you operate?
Probably how much fun I have. I look at my calendar every day and, you've been in corporate, so you know the drill. And there's not one day where I roll my eyes and think, oh my God, I cannot suffer this foolishness one other minute. And, and that used to be the norm, right? When I was back in my corporate days. And I think one of the keys to that is I know the things that light me up. And I know the things that that I'm good at, or at least adequate at, but they just don't feed my energy. And so those are the things that we have other people on the team to do who love to do those things. box. And so as I flow through my day and help guide and direct and serve our clients, I think the biggest life and day in the life of is really just how much fun I have. And the stakes are high. Our clients are no joke, and they've got a lot of big things they're trying to accomplish. But it doesn't have to be stressful or a big strain. You can actually laugh your way through the day and have fun and do meaningful work at the same time. So the other thing that I do, and pro tip for our business owners out there, if you are struggling like most of us do with the balance between working in the business and on the business, right? It's a very, very different mindset. And so for me, I only work in the business 2 weeks a month, and that's it. And so the other 2, sometimes 3 weeks a month, depending on whether we've got a 5-week month or not, those are the times I'm working actually on growing the business. And at first, when you think, oh, my clients, they're busy, they have to set into these schedules and I have to bend over backwards, you actually don't. They're coming to you because you offer an expertise that they need, and they're flexible enough to be able to, to help you structure your day in a way that makes sense. So that way you are not just all over the place. And I found for me, bunching my work together and knowing, okay, this is my service week. So I am in it for my clients, all the drama, all the wins, all the losses, all the tears, all the laughter, and helping them get where they need to be. But then those other weeks, it's like, that's where I get to dive in and work with my team and move the ball forward and think about what are the innovative things that we need to do to not just stay viable amongst all the disruption and chaos, but to thrive. And I think that is something more business owners should do.
Wow, nuggets there. Speaking of the business owners that you're working with, what kind of business owners actually tend to get the biggest results working with you and your team?
Ambitious ones. So we typically will serve organizations that are either established and trying to scale or have scaled and now are becoming a victim of their own success. And with all the disruption that we have going on right now, if you are not feeling the chaos, your clients are. And in many cases, we're all feeling the chaos. And we, as our origin story is really around that coaching work. And now we've moved more into advisory work because, quite frankly, last year, we did not generate more revenue than we did the year before, which was the first time in 7 years that didn't happen. And so that setback of saying, hang on a second, because we're used to growing double digits every year, and 25 was not that year. And it just forced me to sit back and really think about what are the things that we need to do, not just to stay competitive, but to drive innovation and be a leader in the industry. And a big part of that now is really helping leaders and business owners figure out how to make decisions faster. Because what we're finding now with all the uncertainty, everything that's out of our control, and all the macro and micro disruptions that are happening in our business and our clients' lives, quite frankly, decisions are harder to make. You're not as clear. You're not sure that you and your team have what it takes to execute. Your systems aren't right-sized. You're not in that Goldilocks zone of too big, too small, just right. And quite frankly, it's easy to stay stuck. And so 2025 was really a moment for me to be a lot more reflective and be like, okay, we've been playing the same playbook for 6 years now. Anybody who is not, putting their head in the sand knows that in a coaching and advisory capacity, AI is a disruptor unless you leverage it in your offer. And unless you use it as a thing to strengthen your organization and not as let's pretend it doesn't exist and we'll just stay where we are. And so I think some of those things, from a leadership perspective, and that's where we help, is just how do you make those tough calls? A lot of coaches I talk to and a lot of advisors I talk to are like, what's your 5-year plan? I'm like, my clients can't even think 5 minutes ahead of time, let alone 5 years. And so the better question is, what decisions can I make now to move the business forward that will put me in a position to be able to maintain agility as things continue to change? Because seeing around the corner is becoming much, much more difficult than it ever's been before. And so let's think in micro terms, small experiments, but leave our opportunities and options open enough to where we're refining our message, we're delivering high value service, and we can continue to flex as things start to change and become more obvious. And so that's really who we're helping now, are those people who are in it and know that every decision they make today really is going to have a massive impact on the next 12 to 18 months.
Wow. Okay. Last year was tough for even experienced operators, which actually led you to build your predictive index, which I know it's its infancy still, but as you build it, share a little bit of a teaser, but about what problem is that predictive index actually going to be solving?
Yeah, this is where my creative juices just go overboard, right? And this is where my sleepless nights come in because all the what ifs. And so we do have version 1 that's available now, so we'll be offering that to our listeners as well. But what we're doing is it's called the Decision Clarity Index. And through a series of interviews and questions, we are figuring out where your decision blockers are in a variety of different areas because we all get slowed down by something. And perhaps it's clarity in the fact that you and your team aren't really sure what good looks like for the next round. It is a hard decision because if you bet wrong, then you've got your own money on the table, you've got clients that are impacted. And so getting that clarity is not easy. Maybe it's execution. Maybe you've got all these great ideas, but you and your team are not really positioned to execute confidently. Or you find that you're in the same meetings every week talking about the same problems and it's just not moving forward. That's an execution problem. The other one we look at in terms of that decision clarity index is your systems. Are your tools, infrastructure, processes, are they right-sized? Are they allowing you to be agile? Because if they're too heavy, they slow you down. If they're too light, you have chaos. So where is that sweet spot? And then the last thing that a lot of us struggle with is what is the cost of doing nothing? We always think about what is the investment? What's the opportunity cost? How much could this benefit us? But what we don't think about is how much is it actually going to cost if we stay still or if we execute poorly? And so we're ultimately building over our next 3 to 5 years this beautiful crystal ball that our clients are going to be able to tie some of these ideas and their business performance to, so they can see the problems that before they show up in their P&L, before they show up in their top talent attrition, or before they start losing customers. And so that just gets me so excited to be able to start to really innovate on some of those ideas. And our pilot is available right now. So we're super excited to bring people into some of these discussions to help them find clarity in their own business, clarity, execution, the right systems, and the decision-making with a guide towards really having that crystal ball over the next 18 months or so.
Very cool. I'm excited to get a glimpse into it. All right. So kind of wrapping things up, where can people step into your ecosystem? Where can they first find out about you, have a conversation with your team, and get a little bit of a preview of what you're building?
Sure. So the easiest place to find us is either at careerwinnercircle.com or reaching out to Tammy Alvarez on LinkedIn. We'll put all the links in the show notes. And those are the 2 easiest ways. We're also on YouTube, so you can find us, on those LinkedIn and YouTube primarily and through our website. But we'll also put a link in for this decision snapshot. And so what this is, it's going to take you about 10 minutes to go through this diagnostic review. And then based on the things that you have on your plate today, the decisions that you need to make right now, then we can talk about, then we get together and we dig in and we dive deeper into what's holding you back and what are the few things you can do in terms of small pivots to really start to make those decisions faster with a lot more clarity and confidence and move that business to serve your customers and anticipate where they're going to be before you need to.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Thank you so much, Tammy. Yeah, I really enjoy your energy. I love how candid you are in these conversations. In our first conversation and on this one, you're coming off as 100% authentically yourself, which is beautiful.
You have enough trials and tribulations, it's easy to do that, right? So it's just like, it's not always easy, but you can get there. There's always a way forward.
Yeah, thank you so much. Tammy, appreciate you for jumping on and sharing some of your wisdom and your experience. I love your story and how you've been very honest and forthcoming about your ups, but then also your downs. It really makes you a relatable human being. So if you're listening to this and you resonate with some of Tammy's story, definitely reach out to her. She's recently just dropped her links. Just scroll back 30 seconds or so. And if you want to hear from other leaders like Tammy, be sure to tune in to Jumpify Labs for more. My name is Jay. Thanks so much. Take care.